water, and I figured I might as well put together a whole kind of tutorial on how to break down, well, clean if it needs clean, or decide, what to look for if you think it needs clean, you don't know, or whatever. But I want to try to get as much in as I can, so I want to try to make sure I don't leave anything out. But then we're also, for those of you that are familiar with the channel and this reel and waiting for the shootout, that's coming, but we're going to break into this is kind of why I'm doing this video also, and talk about this reel. So if you're here to just know, you've never taken apart a bait caster and you're wanting to know, not necessarily with this reel, kind of in general, and if you're wanting to know more about this reel, all you guys, buckle up, hang on, because this might be a long video. But to get it real quick for you guys that are just curious, first off, knowing how to tear one apart, the most important thing is knowing you got the right equipment and the tools before you get into this thing. Because the worst thing you want to do is go grab some screwdriver that is way too big, some wrench and different stuff, and you're going to scratch, tear up, strip out, destroy, over tighten, all that kind of stuff. So you kind of need to make sure you've got the right smaller tools to do reel maintenance, whether actually this or spinning or any of that stuff. And that your work area is halfway decent. So to start with, you probably, like underneath this, I have a padded mat. It's actually just a yoga mat I picked up at Five Below for like $5 and I cut it down and stuff. But something kind of soft to where something falls off, it's not going to ding, 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 ding and bounce away out of your life and you'll never see it again. So I also put it's just a, it's not even a bounty. It's just a cheap paper towel down, white, so I can see stuff easier for me. And now, so if you don't have a mat or something, then yes, this paper towel would work, or you could use just a pit mat or whatever kind of deal if you have better eyes than me. But you need some kind of area, and if nothing else, have like a tub. Like you can buy tubs with, edges on it to where if something starts rolling or whatever, it's not going to fall off the table and gone. So then you're going to need some tools. So most bait casting reels are going to require some sort of smaller straight screwdriver, sometimes a very small Phillips head screwdriver, right? And if they do need a straight, it's usually got to be one that's very small also. So you can see here I've actually made one to fit in tighter spots without chances of scratching it up. If you can see right, this one and some of these, now this reel's not got it, but I'll show you, for instance, on certain reels, that screws down in there, and a lot of them could have straight overhead, and a lot of your Daiwa stuff are straight. So if you go to putting too big a screwdriver in, you're basically going to be gouging out all the paint and creating you're taking value off your reel big time. So, and though I just mentioned you need small screwdrivers, you also need a very good pointy, stouter screwdriver for those. You're going to have a stubborn Phillips head screw that you need to be able to put pressure on it and get a little more pressure. Not tightening. You do never want to really use this to tighten one as tight as, you never tighten any of these screws as tight as you can. You just you snug them and then you stop. But you need a real good couple screwdrivers, Phillips, and a straight. I'll set them out here real quick and then I'll move them out of the way. Then you need something on this, and what I recommend everybody, no matter what style you use, it's pretty much all reels is going to be 10 millimeters. So you go borrow one from your neighbor and then you just never give it back, or your buddy that's a mechanic, right? Guy at work, in the shop. If you guys have a shop at work, go borrow a 10 millimeter wrench and just never give it back. You could use a socket too, but I like a wrench, and then I just stick a plastic bag like you would get anywhere. A lot of your parts come with this bags. Just don't throw them away, save them, and use them for like this. To when you put it on there, it gives you a little buffer cushion to keep from scratching it as bad. And you could do the same thing. A lot of nowadays you don't see them that much, but a lot of your older reels came with this little tool, which is a decent little straight screwdriver. But then that will work also, kind of the same deal if you have this bag and push down, as I'll show you. So those are the main tools you're going to need. Of course, if you have a Daiwa and you want to mess with knobs, they make a little Daiwa tool. I've bent the heck out of this one. but to stick in there and get the, well, here's one right here. On a Daiwa, if you want to get in there and do any kind of maintenance on the bearings on the handle, that's designed to go in, turn, and then pull it out. And you actually want to hold on to that because you can pull on that and that thing will go flying too. All the things that can go flying on a reel when you're putting pressure on it, you'd be amazed. So anyway, we're going to tear into this reel, and we're going to, the reason why I'm doing it, this is brand new, so it will not need cleaned. It won't even need lube. I'm going to show you how to do what to do though. But yeah, this Arise looks good. I've switched this one out for those of you that are like, what is that reel? Well, it's not stock. The knobs and the drag star are aftermarket. You can get on AliExpress roughly $10 a knob and $15 for the star, and then you need a few other parts to make it fit, because unfortunately this Arise does have a spring-loaded drag star, but the parts are different. They will not work with the regular Daiwa or the aftermarket drag stars that fit them. But all of the knobs I've messed with will fit the stock handle. So anyway, you want to tear this reel apart. Now I'm not going to break it down the handles, and I'm not even going to break down the worm gear. I'll show you, but we're going to, the basics, if you wanted to just, you know, get in and you're going to want to grease the gears because maybe it's making a geary sound, you know, or it just doesn't feel as free as it did, you know, because usually what should happen, and those of you like, well, how do I know when mine needs serviced? What should happen is when you buy one brand new, it should feel fairly smooth. It might have a slight resistance just due to if it's over greased or under greased. But if you're turning it and you can actually, you'll know the difference. And I suggest when you buy one, you know, check it right out of the box and maybe compare it to an either older one or another new one. It should not have any kind of a geary sound like this. You're hearing the line slap around. So you should not be able to hear the gears at all. You shouldn't technically be able to feel them or anything. So this one, if anything, I've already had it apart. It's almost under greased. But then as they break in, they should only get freer and smoother. If something starts getting to where it's not as free as it was, or it gets a little noisy, it's time to do something to it, right? So that's what I'm going to show you on this as I tear this reel apart. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get this off. Now, if you're dealing with a left-handed, a lot of stuff will be reverse threads, okay? So just keep that in mind. You may have to go, if yours is left-handed and you're trying to, you know, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, that don't work with the left-handed reel, but I don't use those anyway. I suggest you guys don't either. I don't care if you're right-handed, left-handed, left-footed, right-footed. So you're going to get a Phillips, and I always usually start with the big Phillips on this thing. You know, it's up to you when you do get it put back on if you just use a little one, because it doesn't really need to be that tight. Some of these reels come with Loctite, some don't. So you got that off. That's pretty simple. Now, as you're putting your stuff aside, don't just throw it all off to the side, because then a lot of times you got to get the manual out, or you'll put it together, you'll put something on and then have to end up taking that assembly part back off. So I suggest starting somewhere and kind of forming you a little deal. Like I've heard people comment like reading a book. So like when you go to put the, you know, like you'd read a book. So when you go to put it back together, you'll start here and put the book, you know, put it back together, right? So start, you know, whichever way, left, right hand, to start one side or the other and then go back the other way. So you start with that there, then you're going to grab, and I'll use this one for instance. So in the plastic bag, you still want to be kind of careful. You don't want to just start pushing hard. You should be able to turn that and just get it where it'll slide down on there. And I already have this one loose, but then you can put pressure and you've got that little buffer cushion between metal to metal. So, and these still, some of the, and especially the aftermarket ones, I don't care how easy you take it on them, you still can get, they sometimes just scratch. So then I like to take my handle and put it, you know, kind of put stuff that's going on the handle assembly side right inside there so you know where it's at. And you'll probably have a thing here, take that off. I just usually put those over here because I've done these enough. I 100% know how that stuff goes on. But then when you get to this, you're either going to, first off, you're either going to have to unscrew your drag star. It may not be this style. So then you would unscrew the drag star, or you would take the drag star off, and there's usually a spring here. I just kind of made this thing to work, and it works. So you'll take this off, and I recommend taking all this off before you actually tear into the reel. So make sure there's no extra washers stuck here, because if there are and you go to losing them, and then your spacing's not right when you go to put it back together. So in here, if you have this style with the clicker, there should be two basically washers. They look like washers, but they're for the drag. So I'll dump them out to show you. Now you could also just pull it off and make sure you don't lose it, but if it falls apart, you're basically going to have two things in their cups. Like I've heard Obi-Wan Kenobi call it like potato chips, like Pringles. So they're bent, and they want to go opposite, because that's what you use when you squeeze, tighten the drag. It kind of works like a spring, so it holds even pressure. So that lets you be able to adjust it slightly without going nuts. Like, because if everything was flat, you would basically, your drag would be limited. Like you would either go from a pound of drag to 10 pounds and just a touch of a turn kind of deal. So that's what helps that work. So just make sure they're the opposite way. If they're flush, it can still work a little bit, but you're taking away some of your the smoothness of how the adjustment of your drag. You're taking away some of that. So anyway, get that out of the way. Then you should check here. You're either going to have one or two more washers. I like to get them off and out of the way. This one had two. I need to find it. And also, I don't have it out right at the moment, but an X-Acto knife comes in handy to get in little spots, not to pry, but just to, help get something out. So we're at this point right now. This is when, if you haven't already, you could do this right off the bat if you wanted to. I suggest getting all of the stuff you don't need on the reel that pops out, like the spool and the side plate, off and out of your way. And then we're going to look at the reel and make sure you look first before you even start taking screws off, because to do it the right way, you want to take the hardest screw out first. You don't want to get everything off and then start pulling and prying, and then you realize you got a screw somewhere else holding that. So on this reel, and it's one of the downsides I've seen to this reel, just in my opinion, it only has 3 screws. So you have one back here, and one here, and one up there. And there, I think these 2 bottom ones may be the same, but that one's different. So when you take these out, this is when you definitely want to start. And I actually started, I've already broke these loose. I broke them loose with the big one. So you might want to get in there and just, I'd suggest, like, when you can get a big screwdriver on there, to do it like that. So we're going to go up here. I'd call this the toughest one. We're going to pull it out first, and it's on top. So when I'm reassembling these, if they were on this side, I would basically be holding it like this, and I would lay them out, knowing where they go back in. So if I had one up here, it would go up top. If I had one over here to the right, it would go to the right, and that's, you can keep track. Some reels, they're all the exact same, which is awesome when that happens, but not all of them are the same. So since all of these, and some of them will be on the opposite side, you'll have 2 or 3 on one side, and a lot of new reels now will have 3 here, and then this one down here is on this side. But just, and whichever way you figure out to keep track is, and works for you, is okay. What I do is I'll set one up here. That's the top one. I'll come down here. Let me just take the back one. I'd call it the next hardest one to get out. And we'll just have the front one that's, more out in the open. So we'll take it off. I'm holding the 2 pieces together. I'm holding the side plate on. You want to, keep it held together. So we'll put that one back there, and we'll put this one here. Now the only downside I see, this is an aluminum framed reel with a plastic side plate. So if you see these screws I'm taking out, and you can tell, what is that screw screwing into? If it would focus. If they're coarse threads or wider looking threads, that means you're going into plastic. Fine threads are what they usually put into, the metal. So those are definitely coarse threads, and since I've already taken this apart, so while I'm still holding it together, you're going to want to turn it like this, because there's spring, there's stuff in there that could fall out, right? So then you're going to want to gently pop this off. If for some reason this won't come off, don't start prying. Double check. You may have, not seen the screw that needs to come out. So then just slide that off. Be careful as you do. Should come out something like this. Sometimes this piece will just, for whatever reason, stays down there. This one actually has a screw in here. For those of you that are following because of the Arise, you want to check it out. It's the first reel I think I've ever seen with the screw, and I've taken that out already. It is a It's not just rigged in there like somebody's like, oh no, that's going to fall out. That actually has a little hole for that to go there. So you get to that far, all that stuff should stay like it is. These can fall out, that bearing, so be careful there. So then you get to this point, and in all honesty, in most reels, this is all the farther you need to go. If you want to do a full tear down and clean like the whole reel, I would recommend go to Tackle Advisor, and he's done one for sure on put in Steve's SVTW Tackle Advisor, and he did a full on the whole thing, like tearing down into here. So I will tell you this though, and I'm going to take this stack off. So if you're just wanting to, for those of you that are just, I just want to be able to grease them gears and oil the bearings, you can do that right here at this level. So I'll tell you guys that real quick. And yes, grease and oil. Let's talk about that real quick. You do not grease bearings. You can grease bushings, but you really probably ought to just oil them also. But you oil your bearings and you grease gears. Now, if you want to cover all the other parts of metal, like especially say if you're in salt water, you know, I would probably dunk mine in like Lucas motor oil. Like if I fished in salt water, then it's probably never going to have a problem. But you can keep everything because if you don't know, if you've never been around automobiles or just stuff in general and tools and stuff like that, a lot of times the guy that keeps his tools and his car the cleanest usually pops up the rust first, because greasy stuff does not rust. It's just that simple. Greasy metal does not rust. So if you want to keep all this stuff coated, that's how much you coat it or how much you oil or grease it is up to you. I'm going to show you my recommendations on what I do. I usually like to put enough, like this one I would call does not have, like I'm going to probably put some more on it. I like to see, and most of new reels will come where it's got enough grease on the gears that there's going to be a buildup around here where they've turned, and what they greased it with is already kind of built up a little bit over there. And this one don't look like it ever had that, like it never got enough grease, in my opinion. So from right here, I don't know if you can see down in here, your worm gear. Now the worm gear is the only thing, most of them have, this one it's very hard to see, most of them have an actual little hole in there. So you could take, and that's why I recommend like probably the brands to use. In all honesty, if you can swing it and you want, in my opinion, the best is out there. I don't even own any, but Lucas makes a little oil, but look for a oil bottle that has the little metal stem sticking up, because you can get in here in tighter spots and squirt a little, you know, just a drop. All it would take is you put a drop in there. You could actually put just a dab of grease on that if it looked like it was getting dry. That's usually the main thing that needs cleaned first on any reel. And I'm not going to go that far on the teardown on this one. Just on the main gear, there's a couple gears under here you can check that go together that actually work the worm gear, and then there's a little piece that goes in. Oh, I forget what they even call that. You got your worm shaft, and then the worm, I forget what they call that little pin. I'll call it a pin. That thing's usually not that bad. This will just get nasty stuff built up on it eventually, and then you want to do a full-on service, like I mentioned, the Tackle Advisor, and I've got one or two here and there, but I don't even remember exactly what words I used and how you would search for them on my channel. So you've got bearings here. That one, of course, you can see is simple. You can grease it just from that side there. You put a drop. I put just one drop of oil on every bearing. So you put a drop here. And this one, I think that bearing you're looking at is the only one. There should not be dual bearings on this. I don't think so. You put a drop on that one. Now, unless you're totally doing a complete deal, I don't mess with these, and I don't recommend doing messing with the anti-reverse. If you do go that far, if you're like, well, what do I do if I want to do that? The most I would do, if you want to take that out, like soak it and clean it, and then put just a light coating of grease back on it. But honestly, unless your reel is totally old and whatever, don't mess with that. You're just going to put a drop of oil on every bearing. So this side, that side. The only one I don't, and it usually doesn't need anything, there is one buried down in there. You take this whole piece off, and I will take this off just to show you guys. Now there's a piece under here, so make sure that that is going to stay there. So then this comes off. So if you're doing full-on tear down, you'd want to take these two screws out, and there should be a bearing under here. Sometimes it's a bushing, and that's where you would add a bearing, like on some diodes, I think have a bushing there actually. I'm not sure. Some rails do. This one I think is a bearing. It feels free enough. I think it's a bearing. So you take those two screws off, put a drop on that, and then screw that back down. This one it's not going to need it, so I'm not going to mess with it. But then I recommend just putting a drop of oil down in there. There's one down in there. It could be a bushing or a bearing. And this one I think has bearings on both sides the way I looked at it. Now this one I'm going to flip it, but I'm going to hold my fingers on these springs. See what I'm doing here? Then you'd put a drop here, and it would get into whatever is in there. Or you could pull that out, but that's a C-clip. Those get nasty. RC cars had these years ago, and they've almost done away with most all C-clips on most things because they're just a nightmare to pop on and off. That's the thing you can lose the most. So I didn't tear it apart in this first thing, and I'm not going to now, but if I was lubing this or tearing it down, I would just get a drop of oil down in there to that side and this side. So you've got those bearings. There is a bearing in here, but you could actually, if you don't want to pull that stuff off, you can see it, and you can hit it with a drop of oil from this side. Or you can simply, as I lost the spring, you can pull this off, and then you can get access to it better. Just put it like a drop down in. I guess I need a pointer. You can put a drop, like right in there. That's why those, this one kind of works, but it's a little funkier. But, you're talking just one little drop. There's really no way to get a drop in here unless you take that off. So you've put drops of oil, one drop of oil in every bearing, so you're basically good to go. Now, if you wanted to just lube to double check this, like I said, I would basically just put, I wouldn't like try to, you don't want a ton of stuff in there. I would squeeze just a touch of grease on there and then work it back and forth. And then I would call that good. And then you actually want to wipe off. Like a lot of times I'll put, when I have this part apart, before I put it back together, I will actually coat it in oil, but then I wipe it down. Like where you don't want to clean it with soap and put it back dry. You'd want to like put some oil, but then wipe it almost get it as clean as you can, but still oily in a sense. Because if you get too much stuff out here, it just collects dirt and debris and stuff. It makes it sticky. So you kind of want, it's kind of a toss-up, and you'll hear different people talk about different, what they use or what they recommend because of that fact that it's out there and it's exposed. And, it'd be like, imagine just taking a spoonful of peanut butter and driving down a gravel road. It's going to have dust stuck all in the peanut butter, right? So you still needs oil. It needs grease. It needs oil out here. It doesn't need to be totally dry, but it doesn't need a ton. Okay, so then let's just talk about on the gears. Like I said, I'll try to show you. If you want to, and I recommend, I never mess with this bottom thing. I just always, whatever it had on it, it's always down there to where it's not exposed to anything. But if you, there's different theories on drags about, you've probably heard them talk about run them dry, run them wet, run them whatever. I just run them usually how they come. I don't mess with it. But as you can see, this is the, for those of you wondering about the rise, this is the drag assembly. You can see how it goes together right here. So if you lose this stack and you're like, oh God, how did this go back together? On this one, they start with one of those discs, and then you should have the gear, teeth gear, and then another one of those, and then the clicker part itself, and then another one, and then this top plate. Now, I know this is kind of a how to lube, clean, and put back together, but while we're on the subject, do you guys see that? That is one refinement that could be done with this reel, in my opinion. They've added this huge plate on there, and it does a job and it works, but it's almost like it's too big. If your stack is only that tall, it should be about the same size as what your plate putting pressure on it is, in my opinion. Just one extra thing I've seen that they've have some weight that they could shave off this reel. So anyway, as we put it back together, don't forget this piece. And this piece should always look like the gears are going forward and like it's going to cut, right? And that's because that's what's used to push the this thing back into, to re-engage it. So keep in mind, oh, I almost forgot. Right here, so while you have this off, you'll want to put just a little bit of grease. And this is usually not a high pressure in their plastic. It really doesn't take too much. And these are already coated, so they're fine. I'm not going to mess with those. That's one point where, I don't know if you could over grease them to where it would give you some resistance, but that's pretty free, and they look all nice and greasy, so they're perfect. They don't have a lot, there's not much force on them, and it's not that big a deal. So let's undo this stack and we'll put it back together. So you see that piece, and it's usually always greased. If you want to clean it and grease it for whatever reason, you'll want to use just a little bit of grease on it to grease that. So then we're putting this back on. Oh wait, I like to have this back on. So if you get this screwed up and you're like, oh, how does that go? It's like a ramp. There's like some ramp looking pieces, and there's a metal part. The metal part up, the ramps go down. How do I got a hair in here? There's ramps over there, so that's how that'll go. But so you put the gear back on with the metal piece sticking up, the ramps going down, and you want to put it on. Make sure it lines up in the back. Oh wait, I was going to show you guys something. Sorry, for those of you that are following how to put one back together and all that. For those of you that are a little in the know about reels, and the one I think thing that this plus about this reel, if you just watched the reel test talking about how Shimano and their new, I forget what they even call that, it's not hyperdrive, it's their whatever drive. I think this reel has that, because if you look, see how pointed that is, and then it's real, like they made an effort to make it that way. So when this goes on, it does feel very solid, so almost like it's made to help support. I know that the die was more just tend to seem to be rounded on the spool, like it's not as big a deal, because you have a bearing right there. So basically what you're doing is like what Shimano's doing. You got two bearings right there together, and if these pieces fit together tight, in theory, that just makes that much more, strengthens it to where it's not going to flex out like under crazy, the heavier load is going to help it. And I think that's kind of what they tried to do. I can tell the slightest wiggle, but that's a pretty good, it's not a completely solid tight fit, but that's pretty good. So anyway, I thought I'd show you guys because I got some downsides and some plus sides to this reel. But anyway, you guys don't care. You just want to watch, how do we get this thing back together? So remember how it went back. Your springs go back on here. Then you put the gear back on. Now, I never, unless you can buy on certain reels, you can buy aftermarket thumb bars. I never mess with these. These can be the hardest, funkiest things to mess with and get back together. It's something that shouldn't be come off. And even if I'm cleaning one, I will literally buy a thing of, and for those of you that don't know, usually brake clean, if you've ever heard of brake cleaner, it's kind of just, it doesn't eat up on plastic or metal or none of that, and it just cleans like it's a degreaser and gunk cleaner, right? Before I would disassemble that, if I were you, you could spray it down with all the other stuff off. If you were doing a total disassemble and you basically pulled the worm gear, you pulled everything out, I would probably just give that a shot of brake clean, let it dry, and then re-oil it. I would just squirt oil down to where it got in all of the areas, in my opinion. Because like where this moves, you want to make sure that stays, oily, not dry. But I'd honestly just leave that alone. Usually reels, no matter how dirty they get, this part here really doesn't ever get that nasty. Let's just put it back together. I don't know where that hair, I got a hair. It came from somewhere. So as that's flipped over, you can kind of just leave it flipped over and just go back the way you came, right? Take it off, make sure you flip it like this, like a pancake, right? Flip it over as you put it on. Make sure these little, there's two little, I started to call them the TIT words, but then that pops back on. That's simple. So then we got that there. We've done oiled everything on the bearings. We've greased a few different things, but then on this, I don't know. I've heard different arguments on how much to put or whatever. I usually feel that you can't over grease or over oil anything. It may have a little resistance at the beginning, but then it's going to smooth out. But I don't like to just waste the stuff either. And that hair must be sticking on my finger. I don't even know where it came from, but it's been in my way for a bunch now. I usually just do a light. Oh my God, is my ardent real butter hardened? I usually try to get a light, just a trail of it as I'm turning the gear. And yeah, my hands are shaking, but this reel felt real free, and it may make it feel not so free. I don't know if you can see, it's already starting to get a little bit there, but it didn't take much, and it already had some, and it is new. So that is all I feel that I'm going to need at first. And I can, like me, I can always tear it right back down apart. I don't have an issue with taking it back apart. If you're a person that, you're like, oh God, I do not want to do this, and you can feel free to put more grease on the gears, 2 drops in the bearings, because here's my thought on bearings. No matter how long you set and squeeze that bearing after, especially spool bearings, after 1 day's use, it's going to have just a coating of, oil on the metal parts, and there's not going to be any leftover. It's going to be pushed out, right? Out the seals and out the side, because they don't really truly seal. I feel it's just gonna come out in the process of using and working the thing, in my opinion. Like, I've never really tested it to see if I could totally fill one and how long it took to empty out, but I just use a drop because it seems to get the job done. So then you're going to want to go back together. The trick here, when you're putting it back together on this end of it, is to make sure that little... Now, some reels don't have that. Like if you're dealing with Shimano and other brands that they got the long spool shaft, all your Tatulas and stuff like that, they're not going to have this thing sticking out this side. But if you have a reel that does, there's a couple things you want to line up. You can try to line this spline up with this and that at the same time, or a lot of times you can simply push these out and then put them in later. So I'm going to try this one once and see how hard it is. And the trick here is, while you're doing that, you want to make sure those two springs could fall out, okay? So you have to be careful. You don't want to get them on there wrong and then have to reassemble this thing. So my lighting is horrible there, but I think that hole lined up. So then you make sure that it's together. Now, I recommend putting your screws back and then kind of checking it before you go all the way, just in case something isn't right, especially if you did a complete teardown. You can kind of turn this, make sure is that okay or whatever. Now, you don't want to go crazy turning this, because anytime you have the spool out, even on some of them that doesn't necessarily have to have it, it could still let these 2 gears not be perfectly lined right. I've just seen it, and I think this reel may be like that. So at this point, you're going to go back together with your screws, and I recommend not necessarily, almost the same thing. I'd like to try to, I'm holding it together. I can see the top one, but if you want to go kind of the same reverse order, and these 2 screws are the same on the Arise. The 2 bottom ones, they're the same screw. I don't think I see a difference. They look to be the same. I can't tell the difference. The top one is definitely, it's skinnier and a little bit longer. It's definitely different. So get one of your bottom screws. There's 2 of them. Now here's the trick. This is one of the downsides I feel to the Arise, is you only have 3 screws holding that side plate on, and it is plastic, right? So those screws you're screwing into plastic. So, and don't go crazy. I know I've got this big one. A lot of times you can actually, to keep from going that, is just tighten it with the little one. So that's what I like to do. Just to keep myself honest, right? It's harder to strip out a screw as far as the thread part with a smaller screwdriver, stuff like that, right? So, and I snug them. I mean, I go tight, and then I just a little bit with this. I wouldn't want to do too crazy with this thing. Like this thing right here. Like I actually just barely turned it, and I turned it more with this. You don't want to do that with plastic. So if you bought one of these Arise or any plastic reel, basically, where metal screws are going into plastic, you don't want to go crazy. It's just I'm giving you that warning, throwing it out there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we'll put the spool back in, and oh boy, what did I get wrong? I got something wrong. No, I'm just playing. It's right. So we got the spool back in. Now we go back with your, make sure you should be able to go the exact same way. So we had two, and if one is thicker than the other, that part shouldn't matter. It's basically just to keep that stuff from riding on to where it only would hit the inner race, not the outer race of the bearing. And this one, for the distance wise, they have two. They look to be about the exact same. I don't think I can tell the difference. The Accurate reel has two, and one is thicker than the other. Okay, so then we're going to go right back on with this, and if you've got it lined up, you can just put that on all at once. If you didn't take that assembly apart, basically, and it should stay the right way. If you're worried about it, take these two off. Make sure they're, you know, going the opposite way of each other to where there's a gap there. Put that on. Now this is the part where I like to, as soon as I get this, I like to double check my drag clicker if it's got it, or my overall drag, just to make sure that that stack didn't come undone or jack up somehow. And you don't have to go crazy tight. Put the star back on. That part is pretty simple. So then of course this, you're just gonna, same kind of deal. And this, one thing I like about these, they look cool, gold, but they're so big. What you can do with this one, it lets you, you're gonna want to tighten that down and then look and see like if this needs to go a certain way or not. Now normally most of these, if you aim, you do it two ways. You can keep it flush with the flat part where the screw hole is, or you can aim one of the points at it, and it usually lines you up. But with this long nut, you can actually leave it on to where you know you got it on there right. So, if we did it right, you guys hear that drag clicker? I'll be honest, after having multiple drag clickers and stuff like that, it is very hard to beat the Daiwas. The Zillion in particular, but even these are Daiwa-esque, I guess. Not quite as good sounding, but not bad. The Lingle and several others are like this one. And that's not bad. But like after you've had enough and you compare them side by side, you can tell a little bit of a difference. I still like that. That's a good sound. Okay, so we got this reel figured out, right? Hopefully you guys like that. If you have any questions, drop them below. I'll answer them if I can. The Rise reel is exactly the same as one of Abu Garcia's BFS reels. Yeah, I don't know which one. If I had to call this, it's definitely Abu-like as far as this kind of stuff. But let's talk about, so if you have any more questions about the, how to lube it, clean it, put it back together, take it apart, whatever, feel free to drop them below. But let's talk about this thing now for those of you guys that have watched, seen the internals. And on the store from AliExpress, when you find this reel, there's a bunch of tear down pictures showing it. So I'll recap my plus and negative, what I found, to me anyway, that I think could be an issue. First off, let's talk about the weight of the reel. If you saw that when I put that top plate back on, that definitely could have been shaved a little bit to save weight, but I didn't show you guys. But with this side plate off, is plastic, but it weighs a lot. This part right here, it's just, I think it's mostly cosmetic, but I think it does a little bit like what these, but what you can accomplish, basically you could accomplish that with the same metal sleeve, right, to just reinforce that plastic part, since it's a plastic side frame. But that side plate is crazy heavy. So I think if, like, and I'm not saying this is a bad reel, but in the future refinement of it, I think that they could shave some weight off this reel. First of all, put aluminum gears, change the, shave some of the weight off that, the other plate, and I'm sure the other things I missed. And they could definitely get this thing way lighter. Maybe in a BFS version of it or something. I don't like it. It's okay for the ease of maintenance, and it does hold together, but the fact it only has three screws going into plastic holding it together, it may be fine, but I just see where a guy could strip one and you instantly have two screws holding that reel together. And I don't know how much it would cost, what it would take to get a side plate. So I mean, it's just be careful with the screws. I also, though, if that were to happen, I also see where a guy could easily go up a size, track down a screw, and wouldn't be a total deal breaker. The screw in here would be harder to work with to get one that, so it doesn't mess with the spool. But the overall guts of the reel and the overall feel of it, and then let me show you how. I guess pretty free after I added a little more grease. I still didn't add a ton because I'm going to get out and fish it, and I want to be able to compare it to these guys that I've used a while. I don't want to have it over soaked with grease and be like, oh yeah, I can feel that resistance way over these other reels. So let's talk about tomorrow. I'm going to try to get out and do cast testing. I still haven't decided 100% if I'm actually going to get out on the a field somewhere, or what I'm thinking of, if you guys remember my test little area, it's a pit that I stand up real high on, but it's like having a bird's eye view of seeing where the baits will be landing. And so it sets low, so if there's hardly no wind hitting that water, like me and you, basically what it'll save me from having to do is walk out, because if I'm bombing some baits out there's going to be long casts. So it would save me from having to walk out there, and I don't have a true way to measure. I'm not like the reel test. I don't have one of those roller deals. I would have to, and I'd probably need to invest in one of those, and it wouldn't matter where I'm at. I could, the little line counters like Roar Fishing and several of the Japanese guys have that line counter type deal. And you guys comment, I don't even know where, I guess AliExpress had them. Hell, I don't even know. I've never even tried to look one up. But on the water, like casting onto the water, especially from that place, I could tell real quick if one's, you can tell the distance kind of deal. So still up in there on that. I'm actually up in there. Matt wants me to go fishing. I think he's going fishing. It's only going to be like in the maybe hit 45 degrees, maybe not. And that's going to be chilly with like out on the water, 45 degrees. Your hands are getting wet from reeling and casting. It's going to get a little chilly. Last time I was out, if you guys remember, me, Matt, and Hannah went, we only caught like 3 fish, and my hands were froze with full gloves with the fingers covered even. So I don't know if I'm going to mess with it with fishing. I think I'll just stick with my plan of going out and testing this guy against the others. But let's try real quick a little comparison as I end this video. So the guts of this, in my honest opinion, I think it's legit on how it's built. Like I've said, I'm a little leery of anybody that's going to take this thing apart if you strip a screw out, or if you just have, you know, notorious for over tightening and stuff. This reel could be an issue, but it could be fine. I mean, it's fine for me right now. I've taken it apart twice now, put it back together, no issues. I had something else I was going to talk about. I do like the overall, like I like this. That's the second best one I've seen that I like. The one on the Aldebaran 2016 was my favorite of these line guides with the big cone shape, and this is the second one. I like it. I think it will work and function pretty much like the Aldebaran did in some of the other Shimanos. I like it over these Dark Wolf Ultra variants and stuff. As far as what I think it'll do anyway, I don't know. I haven't really put it to the test, but the gears, all of the way the internals were set up and working. I was a little leery, if you remember, I showed you that screw that is kind of keeping the anti-reverse bearing from moving. It's actually not a bad idea, but I just hope this plastic housing isn't a weak point. If I looked at this whole thing when I tore it apart and put it back together, I think it's a solid built reel. If it has a weak point, it would be for somebody that, you know, is going to try to put 50-pound braid on this thing and tighten this drag as tight as it'll go and winch in stuff, which I think the way the drag stack, I don't think it'll have crazy amounts of drag, so the anti-reverse wouldn't stand a chance of slipping inside that plastic housing. That's the first and only really thing is where I see where this reel could possibly fail, in my opinion. But I haven't even read up how many pounds of drag it's supposed to have. I don't think it has like 20 or 24. But I'm telling you, I've seen guys go in there and glue the drag stacks together. I had a Tatula, glued the drag stacks together, you know, to where it was just direct drive, and then he stripped the spool, spun on the shaft. You know, something's got to give. You guys are using 50, 80-pound braid, 65 or whatever, and trying to, I don't know, use them like a true winch. So let's talk about real quick. This is going to be a shootout. If you don't know the deal, haven't followed the channel, you're like, what's this guy talking about? We're having a shootout between these reels. That's the cheapest one that I recommend from AliExpress. Awesome reel. It's actually the reel I recommend from AliExpress. All carbon or plastic framed. There's my favorite reel of all time, the Daiwa Zillion 1000. And then this reel. So these two I've kind of used for chatterbait, so we're going to do a chatterbait shootout. But right now we're going to do a shootout, and I'm going to tell you which one I think is the smoothest, best built, bang for your buck, right? You guys already know which one I'm going to tell you. But like, if I could only have one reel for not necessarily the cost, you even just take away the cost. Okay, you can take one of these and it's going to have to last you, and the palming, the overall aesthetics, build, and all of that, it's still always this guy. Honestly, at the moment, I love this thing. So this one's still a toss-up because you have a lot of extra weight. But if this reel performs better than this reel, this may be the new one. So then let's just feel though, like, what do I think, which one is the smoothest? You know, less resistance and less no geariness, like smooth and no resistance, the least amount. So I have to admit, I just put grease on this and it still feels, I didn't put a lot, just a little, but it still feels it's very free, and the gears feel smooth. Now they are brass, all these others are aluminum. I think this is definitely more free though. I think this is a freer, I can't tell because I got the line on it, but I don't hear anything, but I honestly believe that one may have it beat. But that's old and worn in. Like, not old. We've got it broke in. I think it's about perfect for what it should be. And then, oh boy. Ooh, this guy. Then you touch this guy. No comparison. Hands down, no gears, feel the freest, one of the freest reels you'll feel. That Zillion, these two can't touch it. It's on a whole nother level. This Zillion, the older Zillion, now I added two bearings up here. Stock it. There's a bearing here and here on the worm gear. I added on this one, but the new one that I'm actually the first one I bought that I'm actually traded to Charles, it felt as smooth as this one without those. Those still haven't been replaced. But I'm telling you right now, there's just a freeness. And I don't know if you can tell by when I spin that just how long it keeps going. I barely spin it. But there's a freeness, no feedback from like deal on that. It's just crazy smooth. Yeah, and I think what I may be feeling, and I know I'm getting deep into my feelings. I know. I think what I'm feeling on these two, they'd be closer to each other. I think I can feel when I first start that up, the heavy gears compared to the aluminum gears. There's like a huge difference in the weight of what you're starting your rotating mass, just like if you were casting this spool, right? So I think I can almost feel that. There's a little slop right there. I can feel that too when I move the handle much. That one, just ever slightest. Something's moving. I think that's the knob. Yeah, I think. What is moving? That is weird. I've got something that I make pop, but I can't move it. I don't know what it is. Is it there? It may be just the drag star. This is that spring-loaded drag star. It may be something to do with that popping and crackling. But I swear I don't feel any give on that. But this is crazy. Crazy, buttery, smooth feel on this when you add those a couple other bearings. And the other bearings, in case you're wondering, the only thing separates this from like the Steez A and that kind of stuff, bearing count, is on the handle. The stock handle comes with two, I want to say they're in here. I can't remember now, but it comes with two bushings, two bearings on the stock handle assembly, and then the two on the worm gear. So this reel has them here, and then now it has actually two bearings here and one here, so it actually has even more than a Steez. Yeah, I said it. It's better than a Steez. Maybe not. I may buy a Steez. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap this video up almost an hour just to show you overall reel maintenance. And if you've stuck around, you're not familiar with Bass and Bonsai, and you're like, this guy's insane. Yeah, I am. So feel free to subscribe, tag along, watch all the other videos. I put a video out about everything you could think of, and yes, I'll be repeating myself just like Tactical Bassin every month, year, whatever. Hello from Poland. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Well, Tomas, hello. I think the Arise is as smooth as my Steez and my Taney, but I have never had a Zillion 1000 to compare it to. Well, I think what I'm feeling, and that's Jay, he's the one that recommended this to me, by the way. I think what I'm feeling is the weight of the brass gears. I've never been a fan of brass over aluminum. You guys know me, I run loose drag. Oh, the drag's too loose. You'll always hear me say that. I don't crank down. I don't run anything usually over a 15-pound test, so I'm not a big, I don't like, oh, the Abu Garcia's got 24 pounds of drag. Who cares? The Shimano's are like 9 pounds of drag. I never tighten them up all the way. Like if I'm setting a hook, like you guys have seen how I go out and I adjust my combo for a hook set. Like I want to feel if something hit right at the side of the boat that I can yank, like, knee-jerk reaction is going to yank like as hard as you can, and I don't want the rod to break, I don't want the line to break, or the bait to just strip the hook out of their mouth. So I kind of adjust my drags for that, to where right before I feel the line or the rod would stand a chance of breaking, and that's where I leave it. And I may adjust it. You'll see me adjust it a little bit here and there. What's funny is you'll always hear me, oh, that drag's too loose. Oh, that drag's too loose. And like Charles said, he goes, yeah, but you get in every fish when you say that on it. Like the fish still comes to the boat. It's just the ones you'll never hear me say, talk about the drag being loose and then they get off. It's like I pulled the hook out of their mouth or something. So anyway, I'm not a big deal on that brass gears because I feel the aluminum ones last a long, long time. And every Daiwa reel made, you can get replacement aluminum gears. Not like I'm not saying not expensive, but not that bad compared to how high some of these reels are. Like here in the States, $350 with the brass gears. I don't even know what the replacements are, but I can get one. I could probably buy this reel from Digitaka and then buy brass gears also, and probably still be under what they sell this one for in the States here with brass gears. But anyway, that's just me. So I honestly like this reel enough, and what I'm hoping is I'm not going to buy more. If you guys know the deal, I'm selling and trading off the ones I have multiples of, just so I can justify having multiple different brands of reels, different ranges of reels to show you guys and for myself, But I like this. I hope at some point I'd like to see this. Just I don't even know about retooled, but definitely I think there's a lot of extra weight there. I think I would like this if it right in there, some of the weight was shaved off, but it wasn't that. I don't even know if I would want it double anodized. Just anodize it one color with the carbon. I like the inlay behind it. It reminds me of my MG Extreme 2. But then lighten this baby up. There's so many ways when I tore this apart where you could make it lighter. First of all, if you put, I guess you could even put just a carbon fiber. Even if you didn't want to change the mold and plastic on this, you could actually do away with the aluminum. Have another one that is actually like a carbon fiber insert, or you could lighten that. You could lighten that plate I showed you on the drag stack. Several different things. You could look at this reel on the refinement of it. It could be lightened overall. It honestly feels to me, I think it's just the brass gears. I haven't had a real brass gears in quite a while. I thought for sure it had aluminum frame and side plate, which it almost does. There's so much weight there. I guarantee you that one piece weighs way more than probably the side plate with this aluminum piece, spool tension knob. That thing, you can just feel that piece when you pull it off and holding it in my hand. Like there's a bunch of weight there. I think I weighed it like 37 grams or something, to where your side covers over here with all the braking mechanisms only weigh like 22. So there's a bunch of extra weight there. I know I added some weight here probably, but it came with aluminum when I took off. So if you missed it, Jay, I don't know what point you jumped in on this. The drag star that's spring loaded, none of those parts are the same as Daiwa or these aftermarket ones that'll fit Daiwa. Let me show you guys that real quick. Where did I put it? I think I may have. Oh, I put it inside that fancy box that you got to undo 5 things to get to. But basically on the Daiwas, the nut part, the spring I think would be the same. But this part and the nut part are smaller. So it's got a small nut that this just goes on and turns, won't even tighten it. And then this clicker part won't hit the little teeth on this to make it click. So I had to use those off of, which reel? I don't know. I think the other one I put back to stock. And I like the looks of this one. This is all stock stuff on the Accurate, but it's the star off of and you guys look at this. Oh, that's another. For those of you guys that are familiar and you're probably wondering, what happened to Single Lifestyle? I've got all my reels, and let's take a gander at them. That is an awesome look right there. Look at that. That blue and purple. Same, almost identical. Other the spools, for some reason, are a touch difference in weight on the shallowest ones. But basically the same reels. Just different color schemes if you're wanting to get them. The Acura, you can buy some of this. This reel probably comes the best in, just as far as bling, right? You want to add some bling to your stuff, you want to bedazzle it. This thing, the only thing I've added, that purple drag star and that purple nut. All that other stuff, that's the way that reel comes. So if you want to fish like a girl or you want to get a reel for a girl, I recommend that one. This one comes all gray, but all I've added, I added the blue line, the nut retainer, and the knobs, well, then I took the star off this one because it comes the same color as the reel. And it definitely made that reel, in my opinion, look better. And don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere while we're comparing looks, and then we'll get out of here. Yeah, we'll use this. The stock. Here's a stock Micro Monster. If you are like curious to what the purple colors look, that is a very dark, deep purple. There's no mistaking that's purple. This, when it's by itself, could almost, it just looks like a light purple because that's considered, and they call it purple in and you can see it's a whole different color purple. So this is kind of a pinkish, purplish color. I think pink stuff or purple stuff will look good on this reel. If you wanted to add something, kind of give it your own look. You add pink to this, it's definitely going to be a huge different contrast kind of thing. I don't know, you guys, I thought I liked this better. I was wishing that this one came with dual spool kind of thing. But then in person, honestly, I like this one. Because when it's by itself, when you just have it like with the blue, it does look purple to me. Light purple, which I actually like. But I see where this one actually looks good too. There's nothing wrong with having both if you want, right? But this one's getting sold. This one's for sale, and two of these are going to be for sale. So just to add a little bit, let me move this dude out of the way. That's the better looking one of the bunch. It's hard to match it up to anything. So there's what you can do if you add just a little bit to a reel. Just as far as looks, but aesthetics and also the ergonomics of it. Because these are okay, and I'm going to try to make myself like them, these knobs for BFS type stuff. But that drag star, I think, just giving it that more gunmetal, metally look is better than that. That black one just looks cheap to come with these. If you guys can make that out. But definitely, if you're going to have the deep spool, wanting to put a little more power to it or whatever, those knobs are awesome. And you can change whatever color. I bet, you know, they've got like camo, greenish camo. You could get a green deal here off nut retainer off of AliExpress with the camo deals. Put some camouflage line or any green line, and that's what kind of makes these reels cool. It doesn't take much, just boom, and then they'll go with anything. Do a little color matching. There's nothing wrong with color matching. I don't care, even if you don't want to fish like a girl. So anyway, and that's what the Zillion. I still have, if I have to have a favorite handle, I like the 80 millimeter. I guess I like these knobs and handles. I like that 80 millimeter handle probably the best. Let me try to get to focus. It says Develo on it. They're the same exact. All of these variants come with this same exact knob assembly, handle assembly. They just, some of them have different writing and whatever, but the knobs are identical. The handle is the same exact. It's 80 millimeters, every one of them. Every stinking last one of them. But I'm starting to like this Steez-ish handle that comes on the Zillion. After just having it, I haven't fished it yet, but how smooth it is, and that it's I believe it's 90 millimeters. I don't think it's 95. These are 80. You guys tell me, 80 and 90, or is that 95? I think, I don't know. I think that's 90. I don't read the instructions, the manuals. I don't look at that stuff. If I had a way to measure it, I would. Oh, wait, I do, but I'm not going to mess with it. But it is the same as this reel. You guys let me know. Do you guys think you like the... I know these feel way better to me than these, but you guys comment, what do you think looks better? Do you guys like EVA type things? You guys all about the cork? Cork's hard to go with because you need a cork, you need a rod with cork handle. Then they all go with that. But I think the Rise is looking pretty good. I think it looks pretty nice. I think the Steez, I keep calling this a Steez. I'm gonna buy a Steez before the day's done. I think I think I need to go back with gold. I got a cool spool tension cap coming for these dudes. If you guys want one for the any of these zero adjusters, I'm pretty sure to fit them all. I hate to share the link and tell you to get it without knowing for sure, because I think it's only marked as going for the stees. But if the stees, all these are the same. You basically have on the, I guess, the newer versions of Reels Daiwas that's come out here in the last little bit. You have the old school, like the one before this that had the bigger type deal before the zero adjuster, but I'm pretty sure all the zero adjusters have that same size that has to go inside there. So when you, if it'll fit the Steez A, the Steez CTS-V, the regular Steez, you know, as long as it's got a T-wing system, then it will fit the Zillions. It'll fit any reel that has the zero adjuster. Should. Thread should be the same. Overall size should be the same. So it's on AliExpress. I'm going to get some in before I actually share the link, unless you absolutely want the link right away. Message me, I guess, and I can put it on there. But I'm getting out of here. All my videos end up being way over an hour. Jay says, published specs on the Zillion and my measured weight on the Arise. The Arise is only 0.3 ounce heavier. Well, let's find out. Oh, also, I switched lineup. So if you guys are following the test that's coming up, the shootout, I think, honestly, after the... I guess I'm not as excited as I was to try them, because I think I already know what the results are going to be. And I'm going to... Spoiler alert! Where's my scale? I lost the scale somewhere. What did I do with it? Oh boy. Am I looking right at it? My scale that weighs, I'm looking right at it. Here we go. So let's just weigh these. Jay's curious. 0. The Arise. How much does your Arise weigh with the stock stuff? I don't know if this is less or more or what. But the line, anyway, I switched out line. So basically, they have the same amount of line, 15-pound braid. I've switched that out, and they have more than what we were messing with the other day. So let me get that on there. Let me turn it. Hang on, let me turn this where you guys can see it. Can you guys see that? Right there. 202.4. Do you see that? Zeroed out. 202.4 grams with the changes I've done. I've done slight changes. So you guys, you tell me, Jay. Too, is this thing heavier than it was, lighter than what the specs say? And then the Zillion. This is, if anything, I don't know. I guess it should be. Let me get it on there. 190.3. So I've switched out stars and knobs. We got the stock handles. They got the same amount of braid, roughly, like within a foot or 5 or something. So that part shouldn't matter. 190.3 grams, and then what was that other one? 203 or whatever. So that is like over half an ounce, isn't it? It's like what, 13, 14 grams is a half ounce. 202. So yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, well, 0.3, but I call it a half ounce. So when you're sitting here filling them, there's not a huge difference. If anything, yeah, I don't know if I could tell you that I can feel the difference, but I'm pretty sure this this top cover, it's aluminum under there. I need to take that apart and show you guys one day. But you got an aluminum frame and side plate, to where this, and it's because of the brass gears, this is just aluminum frame, but then graphite or carbon side plates. So I don't know if you guys even know that, but this, the Zillions, if you can see underneath there, this top thing is a plate, just almost like the, if you guys remember right, the lingle. So there's 2 screws back here. So see right here? Here's where the black frame, there's 2 screws back in here, and then this, I think, pops off. But this is just a cover for looks. You could actually take that off I don't know how thick it is right there. That would mean this reel would palm just a little bit smaller, lower, but it'd probably look like horrible. I don't know. I have never taken that off on this one. I've only taken one apart. I think I took this one apart enough to put the bearings in. That's all the farther I've taken one apart. But you want to see something crazy? I've yet to really find anything that I do that this reel can't do with up to 15-pound test. Now, you want to go crazy heavy frogging and cranking drags down as tight as we can get them kind of thing. This isn't your reel. But for just all-around bass fishing, I'm telling you guys, I don't know how long this little reel will last, but I'm putting it through the paces. With those bigger knobs, it weighs 151 grams. So let's just see what we added. Stay on there. So 138. These little lightweight knobs. Oh wait, this one has line on it. You'll have to add weight for the line. But 138 grams, brand new. And then switch out to power knobs once you get it lined up. 151. So yeah, we might as well just weigh it. Of course, it's hard to, I don't know how much weight I've got on but I do have the stock Zillion 8.5 to 1. 176 out of the box. Add line, change the drag star, change the knobs out. Yeah, 190. 176, 100. So yeah, you added some weight to this sucker also. But still lighter than the Arise is like close. It's not that far off. So it's going to be lighter than your Bantams. It's going to be heavier than the Zillion. I can't remember what the Steez A is. I don't know if it's where it's at. I tell you right now, I'm very doubtful about actually truly getting rid of some of these reels because these are awesome reels that I've got waiting to sell. And actually, I think Matt's going to buy my other Zillion and what other reel was he? Oh, Matt's probably buying the Zillion, the one or two purple rods, and then this reel maybe for Matty to fish with it. But one of them he might use for shaky head and drop shot on the contest rods, and he may buy the big sexy too. But he's buying the Zillion for sure. But honestly, there's nothing, like most of them are close to brand new. The ones I traded Charles, they don't have any use on them. But that bad boy right there has impressed me so far. We're going to find out how well it casts against these other boys tomorrow. Whether I'm out on the water, there's a slim possibility I could still call Matt and go, you know what, I want to go. And then make him stop long enough to where I can see if my reception is good enough to do a quick live stream cast deal, or just put one together on the GoPro, periodically throughout the day that I can piece together, like fishing from one spot kind of deal, kind of thing. But anyway, I'm gonna get out of here, guys. Yeah, I got Steez on the mind. I'm telling you, I know I'm gonna end up with one. I just honestly can't decide. I keep looking. If the new limited shallow spooled one had a drag clicker, I'd already had it. It had already been on its way. But it's so hard to justify. I found that thing for as cheap as $520 or whatever it is. But dude, it doesn't even have a drag clicker. It's probably not gonna be any better than this reel. The spool will be better. I think I'm gonna love that spool. I think that's the best spool you can get right now. It's just my opinion. All around spool for lightweight, distance, performance, ease of use. Is that shallow spool coming in that the limited? I think the best Steez reel you could probably get is actually the CTSV, but they don't make a boost spool for it right at the moment, or a shallow spool for that reel. You can get aftermarket stuff, but not a boost aftermarket. The Steez A, all those spools of, like I've been talking about, the boost spools will fit in a Steez A, and the Steez A comes with a clicker. I found one of those as cheap as $260. Looks like brand new. So I may buy that. I haven't decided yet. A regular standard Steez, the magnesium frames, SVTW. I just don't know. They don't come with the drag clicker. They're kind of just out there. Like now they've got the with the limited, the CTSV. It's kind of old school, old news. So there may be something new coming down the deal before long, because they're definitely doing a lot with the. They got the Steez A Hyper Long Cast, the Steez A2. So maybe, I don't know if they've got something planned even after the limited, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here. Maybe I'll put together a video talking about that, possibly even tonight. The difference. Some of you guys don't know the difference in Steezes. What they, what's the deal with the Steez? Maybe I'll put together a Steez video, kind of like I was talking about putting together a video, all these different rails. But I got to get out of here, guys. This video is long enough. Thanks for watching. Whatever you do, get out, go bass and bonsai, and make sure you have fun doing it. Right? No fireball tonight, I don't think.